Dr. Kizzie is in the house. Where are you? Hey! I'm so pleased to introduce Dr. Kizzie Shako. She is Kenya's first female police surgeon. A force of nature, she's the Senior Medical Officer in the Ministry of Health, Forensic and Pathology Services, which is seconded to the National Police Service as a police surgeon, which is based at the police surgery. She's also the founder of the, but I hope I'm saying this correctly, but do correct me, the Vanja Kumia Foundation, almost. You'll correct me. I know, no, Kizzie will correct you, don't you worry. And she's been a guest speaker at many forums, and I came across Kizzie actually in a TEDx talk I watched, and I was like, wow, we need this lady to come and speak here. There is passion, there is knowledge, she is a force of nature, she is a warrior, she is a crusader, and everything else. I'm going to leave the floor to her because she has a lot to say, a lot of knowledge, a lot of vision, and I really think we can all learn a lot from what we're going to hear in the next presentation. Welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Those are such kind words. I'm very happy to be here today. Once again, I'll say that because it's always exciting to be amongst colleagues, and we are usually very spread out all over the place. Now I just have one issue. Everyone who was here before me has already said everything I wanted to say, so I'll try and keep it short. That was really awesome, the previous presentations. Thank you so much. It flowed very perfectly, even despite the disruptions. So I'll just take us through a bit about the landscape of sexual violence in the country and what I think would be a good recommendation. I'm Dr. Kizzie Shako. I'm a forensic practitioner. I have worked for the National Police Service as a police surgeon, forensic police surgeon. And in the Ministry of Health, I was the head of clinical forensic medicine. And now I'm with the Office of the Chief Justice as an SGBV advisor. And I also founded the Vunja Kimya Foundation, which is came about after all the observations that I'm about to talk about, you know, as a way to try and plug in the gap. So that's basically who I am. Now, because everything else has already been said, this is Kenya. Welcome to Kenya. We are in that area that's circled in red, and we have about 51 million people the last time I checked. And just so that we are clear on some of the hotspot areas, they're there, but we don't really need to go into that because I think at the end of the day, the response should really be customized and picked from a standardized tool in all the counties. We are a nation of 47 counties. Now, forensic medical and forensic science provision is provided by, we have these groups of people, the forensic pathologists who are housed under the Ministry of Health. We have the clinical forensic medicine, which is also housed under the Ministry of Health in the same division. We have the forensic human identification, which is done by the same group of people again, and that's where the forensic odontologists sit. We have the forensic pathology lab services, and under the Ministry of Health, that's where we have the National Police Service, the government chemist who has been doing this forensic analysis historically for decades. And now we have a national forensic lab. Now, sexual violence in Kenya, because we are a mixed group, I just want to set the stage for what sexual violence is. Initially, I was to talk about sexual assault, but I changed it to sexual violence because it's a broader term. And sexual violence in Kenya is always or usually referred to as sexual and gender-based violence. And we know that sexual and gender-based violence encompasses numerous other types of offenses. So it's not sexual offenses only, but other forms of assault cases or child abuse. It's also referred to as violence against women and girls and many other terms. So we will refer to sexual violence as sexual offenses or sexual offenses as sexual violence in this particular forum. Why? Because sexual assault, which is used more globally, in Kenya is a specific offense within our context. So we have a Sexual Offences Act that outlines numerous different kinds of offences, and sexual assault is just one of those. And it can cause a bit of confusion. I noticed we have someone who was very keen here about the swab, the previous presentation, talking about a swab that's specifically for high vaginal swabs. What about other areas? So that's one of the reasons I like to clear the air before I proceed. So all these are among numerous offenses within our Sexual Offences Act. So Kenya has a robust legal and policy framework that guides everyone and different stakeholders on what it is they're supposed to be doing, and how and when. And over the last 5 years, especially during the COVID period, because of the shadow pandemic with the rise in GBV cases, there's been a lot more interest in the adequate response to gender-based violence. Or sexual violence and other forms of violence. So we have, the good thing about this is we have a lot of national goodwill at the moment, and many things are happening in the right direction towards addressing this problem. For example, we have our head of state, His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, has made numerous commitments that can be found within the Gender Equality Forum that addresses the response and even evidence management and data collection and research so that we can find a way to this vice. He has also publicly stated his disdain for this issue on numerous occasions. He has tasked many high-level government officers, in fact, cabinet secretaries have on many occasions been asked to find a solution to this problem within their own ministries because it keeps coming up in the news. And so we have numerous policies, guidelines, standard operating procedures, and all manner of documents that are in different ministries. And the problem is that they don't talk to each other. And so you'll find different people doing different things, and we have a lot of duplication of resources, duplication of efforts, and this is one of the problem areas. So our national response to sexual violence, we have the Ministry of Interior, which is where the National Police Service sits. And under the, I'll just point out the few areas in different ministries so that we have an idea of who does what. The National Police Service houses, that's where the police are. That's the Kenya Police Service, and this is who runs the show in police stations across the country. And they are the first responders usually. So any case that sexual violence case that comes to the that decides to report an issue to the police station will be doing it at a police station which is under the Kenya Police Service. They recently launched the Polycare system, which is aimed at returning dignity to survivors. So it's a victim-centered approach. Which also is basically kind of a one-stop center that also houses prosecutors and magistrates. That is the concept. It is not yet running. We had the police surgery, which was only in Nairobi, and that's where I worked for a long time. And I'm grateful for that time because I learned so much about the system. It was like a crash course into what goes on in the whole country. And so this is where it was the police surgery where a lot of medical legal work was being done. What would happen is victims would come from wherever they've been treated and from the police station and brought there for the medical legal document called a P3 form to be filled. And without it, it's a lot harder for these cases to be heard in court. So police stations also issue out this P3 form. It cannot be issued at a medical facility. And so any survivor who needs to have this document must go from the hospital to the police station to get this form issued to them. Then it needs to be filled out by a medical practitioner, which means they have to go back and find someone to fill the form again. And that could also require a second examination. Under the Ministry of Interior, we also have the government chemist who has historically, as I've said, and I want to enforce, really assisted the system when it comes to DNA analysis and analysis of other substances. They also do forensic toxicology analysis. And this has been going on for, I found them there, and this is 12 years in, they've been going on, I heard since 1912. I was really surprised to hear that. And then we have the new forensic lab launched at the DCI last week. The State Department for Gender has also issued Gender-Based Violence Recovery Center guidelines for all the counties to use. The Ministry of Health has recently launched a module on forensic management of SGBV. and other such documents. And they also launched post-rape care kits. They have a few thousands in the country. And this is also where the post-rape care form is housed. So any medical facility that will use any kind of documentation will use a post-rape care form that they will have within them. So what happens is you get this form being filled out, and then it's used to inform the police what has happened. Then they document, issue a P3 form, then the survivor goes back to have this form completed. Now, in the Ministry of Health, all these forensic modules, forensic content is anchored on the Department of Reproductive Health or something to do with HIV, maternal health. It's never really anchored on the forensic division. I'm not sure how that happens, but that's what happens. The judiciary has the National Council on Administration of Justice, which basically acts as the convener of the different criminal justice actors. We have the specialized SGBV courts that was launched in March, and this is a very good step towards the right direction. And the aim is to reduce the delays that we see within our system concerning SGBV cases or sexual violence cases. And there's a study ongoing right now to look into how best to make that SGBV court work. Then we have expert witnesses. So when the court summons expert witnesses, it assumes that the courts assume that all medical personnel are experts in this field. That is the assumption. And you can already see that, I mean, the previous speakers brought this out very clearly. You need a lot of capacity building to be able to adequately handle evidence management. So that's a gap area. In terms of education, in a nutshell, we have a lot of different institutions offering forensic medicine, forensic sciences, yet the forensic people who are all here today don't really know who is offering the training. And that can be a problem, because then, you know, how is it going to work? Do they have practical sessions? Are they going to graduate in a way that they can be absorbed into the system? And I have on several occasions observed medics being trained by non-medical, non-forensic personnel on evidence management, which is an obvious problem. And then in the counties, we have all, you know, different programs running across the country. And then we also have non-state actors who are offering services and doing a very good job, I might add, with their own kind of policies and documents. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that we have a lot of activity in Kenya as far as sexual violence response is concerned. So this is what it looks like. We have a lot of back and forth. And so the victim would need to go to a medical facility, then a police station, or a police station, then a medical facility, and back again. And then the police file will be opened and all these documents will be placed in there. We have evidence that may have been collected in different facilities that will remain there until a police officer comes to pick them up. If they come, they also have a lot of challenges in conducting their duties, and many times these specimens are not collected. And after that, this issue, the case will proceed to the courts after going through the ODPP's office, and that's the prosecution. And many times, I'm sure if this is a global issue, we hear the issue of insufficient evidence. The evidence was insufficient to sustain a case. And the previous speakers have already brought a lot of these issues out. The other issue now is the suspects are seen at that level. They will be engaged at the level of the police more often than not. They may or may not be put through an examination, which essentially means that a suspect may not have specimens collected for comparative analysis. So if you're examining this crime that may have happened, the evidence that is produced, you may not have enough information. And I hear people really pointing fingers at the government chemists, but they say, you know, we can only analyze what you give us. If you don't bring everything, we can't give you all the answers that you may need. So at the end of the day, what is going on is there's a knowledge gap across all sectors that results in all this fragmentation that you can see. We have a lot of adverse dispute resolution. Adverse dispute resolutions that happen. So like kangaroo courts, 90% of cases go through the informal reporting mechanism. So they're sorted out at community level. So the elders, the churches, the mosques, you know, that's where most cases are discussed, and they end there. And money is exchanged many times rather than it being reported to the police. And that's one of the reasons why we have a low conviction rate. So like I said, one of the issues is the knowledge gap. That's a very big problem because we have gaps across the medical sector, the legal sector, the investigation sector on how to adequately handle a crime scene. And there's absent recognition of the fact that victims and suspects in a sexual violence case are parts of a crime scene. It's not just the location, but also the parties involved. And so they must be handled as such. I see a lot of resources and time and energy is spent when you have a death investigation, but this is not the case for the living. The living are kind of just like, oh, this happened, why don't you go there? A lot of time is wasted giving guidance and direction to these victims who are alive and who need it equally, if not more, than the dead people. So this is one of the observations that I have made. And there's a lot of lack of information. So we need to address this issue. What is it that's causing the absent information, the lack of proper evidence management? So what we have here, this is a model. Dr. Kelsey and I published a paper on this, on the gaps in the system regarding sexual and gender-based violence and recommendations that we would make. And that's what the TEDx talk was about. So as you can see, I don't know if you can read it, but what I've tried to demonstrate is that we have, the response would be, let's say this incident has happened now. I report it to the chief in the region or in the area I'm at. And then he says, okay, why don't you go to that person? And then eventually I may end up in a hospital. And because of the knowledge gaps, I may or may not get all the care I need. Because of the knowledge gaps, I may not get proper evidence gathered or preserved properly, which we have already just seen. There may or may not be psychosocial support. There may or may not be any victim protection. There may or may not be legal aid. There may or may not be proper medical care, evidence management, and there may or may not be a prosecution-led investigation. And we know this because when we go to court, a lot of times there's this blank look like, what is it you've written in your document? We don't understand. And which means that there should have been a pre-trial conference where all this information could have been discussed before getting on the stand to give evidence. Now, the result of this is victim or survivor fatigue. They get tired. And this is also one of the contributors to the kangaroo courts or the settling out of court because it's too much work. It's exhausting. You're tired. People don't seem to know what they want you to do. No one takes time to explain to the survivor why they're doing what they're doing. The issue of informed consent to conduct examinations is not really done. I used to find them very manhandled, to be honest, because they wouldn't know why they're doing what they're doing. So you have to take time to explain to the victim, this is the procedure, this is what has happened, this is why I'm collecting what I'm collecting, and this is what you should expect in the future. There's also poor navigation because forensic medicine is it's a science that needs to be applied. And we have seen that application here. It's not a one fits all. There are different, for one person, you might be collecting 2 specimens. For another person, it might be 10, depends on the history. So one has to understand how to navigate through a forensic examination. You have inaccurate documentation, excessive dependence on finding injuries. So was the hymen torn? Was the hymen broken? Was it missing? Was it absent? That's all that we are ever asked about, yet there's so much more to look for. Absent photography, we have not yet embraced photography for living persons. So there's absent peer review and poor documentation because we know photography is one of the gold standards for documentation. We have evidence contamination, as we just saw. Stakeholder frustration. It's frustrating for us as well when we're not able to give the services that we know we should be giving. And when we can observe the gaps, it actually causes moral injury. Another aspect is absent debriefing. We don't have psychotherapy, not only for the survivors, but also for those of us giving the service, and we suffer, secondary trauma. Some places do give psychological support, others don't. And the cost of all this is 46 billion Kenya shillings. There's a study by National Gender Equality Commission that breaks down the economic cost on the survivor and the national cost or burden of SGBV issues. So at the end of the day, you have absent access to justice. So what we need is a one-stop shop, which has already been explained, where we have well-trained, well-equipped, and a well laid out structure, governance structure for the management of these cases, where we have everyone in one roof, except magistrates. I don't think magistrates should sit in glaring conflict of interest. But if we have our medical personnel, an adequate reporting and response structure, we have our forensic team who's there to give guidance or to actually do the work where it comes to documentation, evidence collection, management of injuries, treatment, understanding about the 72-hour rule, 240-hour rule, 24-hour rule, when to apply what. When we can have prosecution-led investigations, data and research would also be conducted. I like what Wangu Kanja presented just now. That would be perfect in a model like this, where we use one automated form that will capture all the information necessary. I think this is very doable. It just needs, again, goodwill to have all these people put into one facility, and we can learn from it. There's an issue when such a thing is housed under either police, because of, again, conflict of interest. It would cause, I believe it would cause a conflict of interest in operations. So this model presents a good way to ensure that evidence management is done according to best practice and chain of custody is maintained. So I think moving forward, we should be looking for a forensic sciences bill or act. And we have talked about this severally with Dr. Kimani, Dr. Kalsi, Dr. Njoroge, and a number of us, Dr. Donna, about how this would enable us to put together a proper governance structure to bring together the key stakeholders in a manner that makes sense and removes all this replication and duplication of efforts. We would require an independent forensic science agency or advisory that can look into all these issues and documentation tools and everything that we have seen and kind of bring some order to that. Determine what an expert witness is, what is the criteria for an expert witness, what should be done before one is going to court, what does photography require for purposes of maintaining chain of custody and ensuring that evidence is actually admissible in court. So yes, thank you very much. This is Kim Worthy. She's a prosecutor in the US who analyzed thousands of rape kits, and they identified over 1,800 serial rapists. Wow. So that's the power of science. So we promote science for justice because this is one of the things that I think we should be looking forward to. What is the power of conducting DNA analysis? And for that to be done, we need to handle our survivors properly from the word go. Thank you very much.
Kizzie, thank you so much. That's your Prissy. I know you're going to love it. Look how stylish you are. For me, it was really interesting to see how, we're going to stand in front of the camera so everyone can see it, how interesting these infrastructures are. And often I think the survivor gets lost in all of these different departments. And it's not as if every department is not doing good work. They're just all on different mandates with different operating procedures. And I see that in South Africa, and I'm sure you will see it in your own communities. And I think having some systematic approach is it's a really good paradigm. It's been so interesting for me even to understand what's, you know, looking at it so simply. So I know that we've had a lot of questions from people online, and thank you everyone online for staying and sending us all your questions. I can't answer them right now, but we will definitely get to them if not later. And I know a lot of people want your email, they want your contact details. So maybe we can put that in the chat later, because this is it's a really good paradigm to follow. Thank you for your work. Continue to do the great work that you do. Is there any question in the audience that you'd like to ask Kizzie before we head for lunch? There's one in the back there. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you very much, Dr. Shako. I'm aware of the good work that you have been doing at the police surgery. There used to be very long queues at the police surgery that would have started as early as 5 a.m. in the morning. By the time we were there, I think the queues had grown shorter. I get a bit worried that you are leaving the police surgery. My question has been, is it that all these victims have to be seen at the police surgery? They cannot be seen in other facilities in Nairobi? That is question one. My next issue is the issues of expert witnesses in court now that you have joined the judiciary, and you will be talking to the Chief Justice frequently, that I have been an expert witness in court, and you'll find most expert witnesses spend a lot of time on the court corridors. Is it possible that these expert witnesses are given priorities once they have been given summons to appear in court? Yeah, those are my two issues.
Yes.
Dr. Mungai, you put me on the spot, but it's fine. Okay, so yes, at the police surgery, there were several queues. When I started in 2012, they would start queuing at 3 in the morning. My first day, I saw 120 people. And that continued for several weeks. Then that changed, and we told them, you know, the people were informed that they should start coming in at 8 because it really doesn't make sense. Then now, I'm not sure about now because I've not been there, and with COVID, there was a reduction in the numbers. They don't have to be seen at the police surgery. Survivors of assault at the police surgery, the police surgery handles all manner of cases, not just sexual violence, but assault cases, interpersonal injury, intimate partner violence, child abuse, traffic collisions, and all that. They can be seen anywhere else. It's just that it has been historically done like that since, you know, I think the 40s in Nairobi alone. In other counties, the medical practitioners or medical personnel within the public facilities are the ones who complete the P3 form. But now I think it's being, you know, it's being changed. It's being looked into by the different government agencies. So I'm not very sure where that has reached at this point. What I do when someone needs assistance is I call, you know, people in the different facilities and ask them to assist. So they can go to any other public facility for that kind of assistance. And as for the judiciary and expert witnesses, there has been discussions around using technology for expert witnesses rather than having them come in person, since that's what COVID brought to the fore, the opportunity to use technology. So for expert witnesses, there may be that option. But yes, I will let the Chief Justice know your concerns. Thank you. There's a question.
There was one more question at the back there, yes. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Shako. Thank you for that presentation. My name is Jose. Mine is a very simple question. Do we have I don't know, it's one of the gaps, sexual offenders database?
That I will leave to Dr. Mungai, Dr. Kimani to answer, because that's really their docket. So Dr. Kimani, do you want to answer that question for us? Is there a sex offenders database?
Thank you so much, Dr. Shako, and I think that was a great presentation. I think that sounds more of judiciary. What I know is that there is a register. The judiciary has a register for sexual offenses, but I also know that the sexual offenses has a provision for coming up with a database for sexual offenders. So that isn't there yet, because we have been talking about developing a DNA data bank. And I think there has been that conversation between ourselves, the DCI, Vanessa is part of that conversation. And I think that will be one of the way forward from this symposium. I hope I've answered the question.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kizzie. Yes, oh, there's one more question. Yes. The mic is here, this lady here.
Thank you very much. Sorry to insist, but I felt this is important. My name is Annie Reri from FIDA. And just listening to what my colleagues Wango and Dr. Shako, who we work with, have mentioned, just to give a sense of comfort, that very recently FIDA Kenya was gazetted by the Chief Justice to lead this entire conversation. We speak coming from the questions that have been raised by Dr. Mungai, looking at the robust legal framework, not only on sexual offenses, but SGBV, which stretches all the way to matters FGM. So we are excited to be part of this. Thank you for the invite, and moving forward, working with the stakeholders, working with Dr. Shako, working with Wango, and all the medical personnel and DNA experts in the room will be reaching out, and we have a 3-year mandate. So we shall be inviting you and working together to see what we can recommend so that together we are able to coordinate and have the multidisciplinary and intersectional approach, as you have mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. And one question, first of all, please put me on the invitation list because I want to be part of that.
Absolutely.
Can you, for the audiences that are not familiar with that acronym, can you just describe what that is? Yes, sorry.
Thank you. I was trying to really optimize on the time. So FIDA Kenya is a federation of women lawyers, one of the oldest women rights institutions in the country, and we focus a lot on access to justice and women in governance. And being one of the oldest legal aid centers in the country, for colleagues who we work with, you can attest, I think a lot of what then Dr. Shako would have to do, or any other medical personnel, is to refer the cases to us. And we are alive, including to the challenges, including that of having a database of the sexual offenders. And we've been engaging the judiciary. We have judgments where we've had very successful prosecution, but speaking as a lawyer, we already know we have challenges where these same sentenced perpetrators are now challenging the issue of sentencing within the law, coming out of jurisprudence that you're witnessing. So I think because of the great strides you're making, but a bit of clawbacks, which is expected because the law keeps on evolving, our hope is that engaging everyone else and coming together, we are able to see how we can have updated policy work and updated laws that eventually make it easier for even the practitioners and the experts in the room to be able to assist victims and survivors of SGBV. So thank you very much.
Fantastic, Anne. Thank you so much. You had a little mini presentation, which was wonderful, a wonderful interview. Thank you so much.